Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, councillors, officers, members of the public, those that are joining us online, and of course, our esteemed members of the press. This planning committee, Tuesday, the 31st of January, 2023. I'll start with apologies. I know of two apologies. Councillor Simon Jones and Councillor Mark Holland, substituted by Councillor Stephen Sweeney and Jill Heasom. I can see that that's correct. Have we any other apologies? No? Okay. We'll move on swiftly to declarations of interest. Does anyone here, any members, wish to declare an interest on any of the items on the agenda this evening? I'll take that by quietness. That's agreement. Thank you. Moving swiftly on to item 3 of the agenda, minutes of the previous meeting. Would somebody like to propose that that's an accurate and true record?
I'm happy to move that, Mr. Chairman.
Proposed by Councillor Fear, seconded by myself. Can I have a vote on that, please? And that's unanimous. Thank you. Right then, we're not expecting any fire alarms tonight, so if the alarm does go off, follow your way to the nearest fire exit and assemble by the statue Queen of Victoria at the front there. I don't know of any tests tonight, but you never know. Not wishing to tempt fate. So the first substantive item on the agenda tonight is the application for major development, land adjacent to Hume Avenue and Mile Ice Lane, Newcastle-under-Lyme. I believe we got a presentation.
Yes,
on that, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. This was presented to members at the last committee, which was actually on the 6th of December. The application was deferred at that meeting for a number of reasons. Members felt they'd like to see some photos of the site, so they can get a feel for the characteristic of the site. Information on the history of the site and the area of land, which I'll come to in just a minute. And also in respect of any covenants on the site, on the land. In responding to those points, there's no planning history on the site. It was intimated that was the case at the meeting, but we just wanted to double check that there was no previous applications that were sort of hidden on our system. So there were no previous applications. However, there was an environmental impact screening assessment that was done in April 2016, and that was for up to 123 dwellings. That in fact did not materialise in a planning application, so nothing happened with that. That was just to assess whether detailed work needs to be done on an impact assessment if an application was going to be submitted, which it hasn't until about 2 years ago now. So the application that we do have was submitted 22 months ago, so it has been in the system for quite a while. The area of land, the other aspect members wanted to consider was the area of land adjacent to the site, which I'll show you on a photograph in just a moment. The County Council have confirmed that it's leased to the high school, Orme Academy, for 25 years as playing fields. So we now have that information that's up to date. And they have also confirmed there are no covenants. So in terms of the application site, I'm just going to put my cursor around the site. You can see it is a bit of a funny shape, a sort of bit like a dog bone, I suppose, really, in terms of its shape, probably the best way to describe it. It doesn't include this land here. So this land here, you can see my cursor, was subject to a fair bit of discussion by members. And that's the area of land that I've just referred to in terms of land that's actually leased to the high school or the academy, as it is known now, on the opposite side of Hume Avenue. I've put this plan up just to show the site in detail. So here it is outlined in red. And this is an indicative layout for the site up to 125 dwellings. You did ask for some photos, so a selection of photos are here. On the left-hand side is the site, and I will refer to this just to give an indication where these photographs have been taken. So the first photograph is actually looking up here. So looking up Hume Avenue up to this roundabout junction here. And the second one here is actually looking down. So you see it's quite open on this area here. And I'll come to this area here in just a moment. So this area here, this is a photograph looking from roughly this point here, looking across this corner. So these trees here and this fence line is on this boundary here. You can see that the grassed area is at similar density and similar cut to the surrounding land. You will see it's a different colour on the plan here. This area has been used for playing fields, so I suspect in the summer it is actually cut down more than the surrounding land. But at this time of year, it is quite long. This is a plan, a photograph looking from this point, looking back towards the academy. So this boundary here is this chain link fence here and some small bushes. Part of the fencing has come down, so there is easy access through there, but there is a delineation on this point here. This photograph is taken roughly from this point here, where my cursor is, if you can see it. And this long stretch of land is this stretch of land here, which connects the northern part of the site to the southern part. And this area of land here is the playing field that I've referred to just now. So that's in that area there. And this photo is a direct shot from just about here, looking towards the school across that playing field. Moving down the site roughly to just this position here at the far end of Hume Avenue. This is a photograph looking down the pathway which goes this way. And this bottom photograph here, I beg your pardon, I'll go back. This bottom photograph is a picture actually looking out across the site. This picture here is looking back from roughly where the cursor is, back up towards the boundary of the site. And this picture here is one of the hedgerow and the informal pathway that runs along this boundary. And just some more pictures here, just showing the nature of the land, looking from this point, going back out to this way and across to the school. So you can see it's quite open in nature with peripheral hedging and shrubs on the boundary. Just coming to the end of the photographs now, this photograph here, this one on the left, is a picture taken roughly from this point, looking back up towards that connecting piece of land. And this area here, which is the playing fields that I've mentioned before, this other piece of land, this corner here is roughly, this corner here is at this point. So we're looking back over towards this piece of land from roughly this point. And this photo here just shows a direct shot looking right up that narrow stretch of stretch of land. So coming back to the proposal is for up to 100 dwellings with associated infrastructure, children's play area, landscaping and open space. The siting area is roughly, well, the siting area is 3.4 hectares, of which 0.9 or just 0.2 of a hectare will be retained as open space. The development itself requires an element of open space, and that will be provided within the site. That provides a density of 33 dwellings per hectare. It is an outline application, so all matters are reserved. There's 5 statutory reserved matters. One of them is being determined as part of this application, which is means of access, which I'll come to in a minute. But the 4 matters to be reserved for subsequent approval are external appearance, landscaping, layout, and the size and scale of the development. So in terms of some of the details, the housing sizes will range from 2 to 5 bedrooms. And this slide gives an indication, I must stress it's an indication, of the type and number of dwellings to be provided. And they are suggested that they will be 2 stories in height. So 28 2-bed, 17 3-bed, 46 4-bed and 9 5-bed. The plan on the left, I don't know how well you can see that, but it gives the indication of the layout. So the northern part of the site is here, and you can see a mixture of terrace properties, detached properties. The southern part of the site is linked with this area of open space, and this bigger area here, roughly 80 properties on this and 20 at the top, will have a separate access off this roundabout in this location. It will need to be modified, but that's within the confines of the highway. And the northern part of the site will be accessed off this road here, and that will serve 20 properties. There is a detailed breakdown there, but it's mainly this picture that I wanted to show you, show the members. So the northern parcel will have 20 units. The vehicular access I've mentioned, and the 80 units will have its separate access points. So there are 2 access points proposed for the development. These are the key planning issues. These are actually detailed in your report. The items on the left are matters that we did go through and discuss at the last committee. Those on the right, and I'm sure members will correct me if I'm wrong on this, they're the 3 areas that you expressed concern over. So that's open space and landscaping, heritage and archaeology, flood risk and drainage. So they're areas that were discussed in a bit more detail at the last committee. So I'm just going to counter through the left-hand side of that list. So in terms of the principal development, the site is in a highly sustainable location and within an existing urban area, and also boosts the housing supply. So in terms of the acceptability in planning terms, it does meet policy H1 of the Newcastle local plan, and it does comply with the national planning policy framework. So in principle, in planning terms, it is acceptable. In terms of the highway safety, there are no objections from the Highway Authority. They have stated that there is capacity within the local road network. It will provide safe access to the site, notwithstanding there are 2 access points. They have looked at those and they're content that they are safe and workable. And also the scheme includes a transport assessment and a travel plan, which the County Council also consider to be acceptable. In terms of the trees and hedgerows, the site is pretty devoid of them within the site. They're mainly periphery trees, although there is a small hedge line on the southern part of the site. But none of the trees are subject to a tree preservation order, and the site is not within a conservation area. So some of the lower grade trees and scrub will need to be removed to provide the access, particularly on the southern part of the site. And this actually provides opportunity to provide better quality landscaping as part of the Reserve Matters application, which will follow if outline consent is granted. And this will be linked to the ecology and biodiversity enhancements that are proposed. Now, coming to the ecology and biodiversity, a number of habitat surveys have been conducted. These have been quite extensive, and the scheme identifies a number of mitigation measures and enhancements, and these are outlined here. So it will include additional planting, but it will include measures for birds, bats, and new planted areas to attract insects. So overall, there'll be a net improvement to the site. In terms of residential amenity, an air quality and noise assessments have been provided, and our colleagues in environmental health raise no objections, but they suggest conditions to ensure that the scheme is acceptable. It is an outline application, so the details of the dwellings are not known. That plan I showed you is an indicative plan of the layout, but the proximity to neighbouring properties and space standards will be assessed as part of the Reserve Matters application if outline consent is granted. The next point is on affordable housing. The scheme provides 25% affordable housing, which is compliant with our affordable housing supplementary planning document. So it is policy compliant because it will provide a minimum of 15% social rent with the remainder as shared ownership. And planning obligations, a Section 106 planning legal agreement will cover the affordable housing that I just referred to. It will also seek a contribution towards a multi-games area at Croft Play area, or Icky Picky, I think it's known as locally, a contribution to fund the monitoring of the travel plan, and a management agreement for the open space on the site. And these are actually detailed in the report. Here is a plan which shows where the location of the Icky Picky is in relation to the site here. So coming on to the three areas that members had a wider discussion on, firstly, open space and landscaping. The current position of the open space and the proposals have been assessed in some detail. And in terms of the report that you have, it does go into quite a lot of detail regarding the proposal. And this was explained at the last committee, and a few questions were responded to, I believe. However, there is sufficient quality and quantity that will remain in the area, so there's no planning objection to the development. The assessment covers the area and a wider area, and it's assessed against our own standards, our open space standards, and has been assessed in a way to say that there's no objection to this proposal. The site will retain some open space, as I mentioned before, just about 0.2 of a hectare, and that will be incorporated within the development. And also there will be the enhancements, as I mentioned, to the multi-use games area that I referred to earlier. Moving on then to flood risk and drainage. I've got several slides on this. First of all, I think need to say that the application has been supported by a number of flood risk and surface water drainage assessments. The application was submitted almost 2 years ago, and the delay in getting it to the committee is mainly looking at some of the details around the drainage and other aspects, but drainage has been a particular issue which we felt we needed to get right. So there's been quite a number of reports and assessments undertaken, and discussions with the Environment Agency, the Flood Risk Authority, which is the County Council, and the Responsible Drainage Authority or Water Board. The site does lie in a flood risk zone, which is the lowest risk, but part of the site is subject to some flooding around the Lyme Brook, which is at risk of flooding. The surface water runoff from the site will continue to be discharged to Lyme Brook, but this will be via a new outfall and restricted pipe work. And this restriction will actually attenuate the water flow and will be a combination of oversized pipes and a detention basin, which I'll come to in just a minute, which will be located in the southern part of the site. This forms part of a sustainable urban drainage system, which is industry standard now. It is the preferred option for the Environment Agency and the local flood risk authority, because it is essentially a natural way of keeping the water flowing but attenuated, but it also helps with biodiversity as well. Excuse me. It's important to note that the detention basin would provide adequate treatment to the runoff to ensure water quality is not detrimentally impacted. So the water quality is also an important point as well as the flow. The foul sewage will flow from the site, will drain to existing combined sewers in Hume Avenue. So the assessment has been made that there is adequate capacity within the existing system. So the agencies that I referred to, the Environment Agency, Staffordshire County Council as the lead local flood risk authority, and the Severn Trent Water, are all satisfied that the proposal is feasible to achieve an acceptable SUDS design. And they have requested that this should be designed in accordance with the proposed drainage strategy. The information supplied as part of the application is quite extensive. One of the reports alone is 135 pages, so it's highly technical, but it goes into a lot of detail. And the relevant bodies that are mentioned there have all had sight of these, and their questions that I have been responded to by the applicants. So in conclusion, they have no objection to the approach. And they have suggested suitably worded conditions to ensure that the details as submitted are complied with. I'll just put this plan up, which gives an indication of essentially where the detention pond will be. This plan is split into essentially two. The top one here gives an indication of the site. So this is the northern part of the site, this is the link, and this is the southern part of the site. So moving over to this area here, you can't quite see it very well, but on the left-hand side, that triangular piece of land is essentially this northern part here. It's just larger. So they've shown that as zoomed in on that. And you can see the suggested drainage route, and that will go down this slither of land going down to the lower part of the site. It will all be collected in oversized pipes underground, and it will link to this detention pond here, and there'll be a outflow from that into the brook, which will be controlled at an acceptable level to ensure that it doesn't flood. So that's part of the SUD scheme, and the foul sewage system will go into the existing mains, which, as I said, has capacity. And the third element was the heritage and ecology. There are no designated heritage assets on the site. By that, I mean listed buildings, conservation areas, scheduled monuments, registered parks and gardens within or in close proximity to the site. However, as mentioned at the last meeting, the historic environmental records identify a section of a possible Roman road at the top part of the site, which just skirts the northern part of the site, just right at the top end. The county archaeologist has had a look at this, and they recommend that further work is undertaken, but they say that this actually can be covered by a planning condition. So that's what you will see in the conditions on the report. So, Chair, in summary, there are no objections in principle, planning objections in principle, as the site is within a sustainable location in an existing urban area. The scheme is policy compliant in all respects, including affordable housing provision. The proposal is supported by extensive technical evidence, which demonstrates that any issues regarding flooding can be overcome. And the full details will be part of the reserved matters that will need to be submitted if this outline consent is granted. And the scale is consistent with other development in the area. So 33 dwellings per hectare is consistent with the general characteristics of that area. So there are no technical objections to the development, Chair. And in terms of policy, it is compliant. Thank you.
Thank you, Nick, for that comprehensive illustration of the points that were made at the last committee meeting. That's very helpful. I just hope that members find it equally as helpful. Now then, we've got a supporter, I believe Mr. Williams, who's joining us from the internet, attending remotely. Are you there, Mr. Williams? It's going to be one of those nights. Mr. Williams?
Yes, hello. I've just been allowed access, I think. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can, yes.
Thank you.
If you would like to begin your speech, please. You've got 3 minutes to make your presentation. After 2 minutes, the officer will remind you you've got a minute left to wrap up things. So if you'd like to begin now.
Certainly. Thank you, Chair. And good evening, councillors. I'm speaking on behalf of the landowner and applicant, Staffordshire County Council. Just very quickly to clarify on a point, that there was a plan presented earlier that was actually an earlier iteration of the illustrative layout. It doesn't affect much other than the fact that the access off Hume Avenue wouldn't be via a roundabout, but via a priority access. So there was a slightly updated version of the layout plan. Clearly, the layout itself is a reserved matter in any event, but just to clarify on that point of access. I just wanted to really cover off some of the points discussed last time, many of which have been picked up already by your officers. So there is no planning history to the site other than that EIA screening that was mentioned from 2016, no covenants applicable to the site. The land immediately adjacent is owned by Staff CC, but currently leased on a long-term lease to the Orme Academy for use as playing fields. Housing mix was mentioned, and there was an indicative mix put up by your officers earlier, but in particular there was an issue around the number of flats, and the indicative layout that we've provided to date shows a mix of 90 detached, semi-detached and terraced houses and only 10 apartments. So it isn't the intention for there to be a significant proportion of apartments or flats within the scheme, certainly based on the indicative layout. Another key point of the discussion was the contribution the site makes in an area of open space. It should be noted there's currently no formal public right of access to the site, albeit there's obvious evidence of its informal use. The Green Heritage Network designation doesn't infer any public right of access, nor does it seek to protect sites for that reason. It's instead focused on the landscape and ecological value of the wider green infrastructure network. Nevertheless, the proposals would re-provide just under a hectare of public open space within the development itself, to include the linear walking route that you've seen through the site, and a children's play area to benefit both future and existing residents. The submission we made also considered the accessibility to suitable alternative open space in the vicinity, which most notably includes Woolstanton Marsh, approximately 400 metres along Milehouse Lane from the northern part, and 500 metres if you go along Sparch Hollow from the southern part. In addition to an area of amenity open space immediately to the south of the site, which follows along the course of Lyme Brook and serves a very similar purpose as the site itself as informal amenity space. Another key issue was mentioned in relation to drainage, and that's been covered off by your officers this evening. Obviously, the Environment Agency, Lead Local Flood Authority and Severn Trent Water were very particular in their deliberations, and we've spent a long time covering off issues with those to ensure that the drainage from the site would discharge at a greenfield rate to the Lyme Brook, attenuated as your officers have explained, and ensures that the development would not be at risk of flooding, nor would it exacerbate any flood risk elsewhere. The applicant's committed to securing 25% affordable housing on the site, a children's play area, public open space within the site, and contributions towards enhancement of the multi-use games area at Icky Picky Park, and to appropriate conditions to ensure—
Mr. Williams, can I ask you to wrap things up, please?
Certainly, yes. Drainage design, access arrangements, ecology. Just to conclude, really, as your officers have said, no technical objections, a highly sustainable location for new housing, and invite you to support your officers' recommendation. Thank you.
Mr. Williams. Okay, I'll put things over to members. Councillor Williams.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Thank the officers for the extra information that we had tonight. And really, photographs are very good, but don't really tell the story that on the development land that the county council only cut it once a year, and through the most of the year, the grass is up to 2-3 foot high. So that's what it creates the paths that I'm going to mention. The land for development in Hume Avenue is unique in our urban area, neglected over 50 years by the owner of the land, Stafford County Council. The grass and hedgerows have been left to grow in the natural progression of life that what makes it unique in our urban area. Not manicured like the areas of open space mentioned in the report by the consultants that the landowners have commissioned. A natural habitat for wildlife, they're crisscrossed by paths used by residents walking walking with their families, dog walkers, and more serious keep fit enthusiasts. On the pathway, residents meet neighbours and make friendly contact with many other people from around the area. I know a lot of what I've said will not stand up in the planning arena, but many residents have put forward their concerns not to allow the development, as we can see in the report. But in my view, there are planning grounds to refuse this planning application. The land for development in Hume Avenue is designated open access in the local plan. I'll go down as policy N16 of the local plan reads as follows. It is the council's policy to seek opportunity to consolidate and enhance the green heritage network as identified in the proposals map listed below. Plan permission will not be granted for development in our adjacent or green heritage areas, which would harm their integrity or their ecological and landscape value as open space. Where development is permitted, the council may require mitigation or compensation measures and will seek to ensure that appropriate landscaping proposals will be implemented and maintained to enhance the area's status and function as a part of the borough's wildlife. I've got a list in front of me of the Green Heritage Network. I won't mention them all, but one of them is the Marsh, Malvern Crescent, the rear of Villport House, Bradwell Wood, and right in the middle, Hume Avenue. And I'll just read the first paragraph and the landscaping. The contribution that elements of the landscaping make to the ecology of the area has been referred to. Many of there may be called natural elements. The landscape is part of the cultural heritage of the area in terms of ways that is a result of human activity over past centuries. In addition, for most people, it is also a thing of beauty and can be enjoyed passively for its visual qualities. The landscape is something to be nurtured, protected against damage, deterioration, and where possible, improved. In my view, Mr. Chairman, there are good reasons to refuse this item. Another reason to refuse is the report by the consultants and the open space commissioned by the landowners. In that report, it states there is enough open space to accommodate the amount of properties within 15 minutes walk distance of Hume Avenue. Some of the open spaces are within that calculation, but some are not. Some of the open spaces are well beyond the 15 minutes walk distance, never mind the busy main roads you have to cross to get to these spaces. And I'll just say the Ramblers Association recommended 2 miles per hour walking as a calculation used in average for the time when walking for people with varying abilities. You would never make it to the Whammy or Sheldon Grove in the 15 minutes allocated, and those 2 pieces of land are in the report by the consultants. I would like to move refusal on the grounds that I have stated. I was going to ask a question about the drainage, but the officer's gone into great detail of what the proposed drainage system is, because the bottom of Sparchal, it floods quite regularly, and the water just runs down from the bank, from Maybank, down to onto Amstel's Lane, and that floods there. So I'm trying to get my head around where that floods. Then you go across the barrier, the footpath, and the grass verge, and then the land behind, which is the development side, drops to below. And as I see on the plans, there's no plan to put properties there. Am I right in saying that? I'll answer that. And also, is the access from the proposed development land to land running down the side of Amstel School? So if you're looking north-south, you've got the sidle way, Limebrook, and then there's a piece of land owned by the Borough Council that runs to the side of Amstel School. Is the access from the side to that land? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. We may need to revisit your proposal just to get a succinct view. I picked up the open spaces as a grounds for refusal, but I had difficulty picking out the salient bits about what are the points you want exactly in terms of a firm refusal proposition. So I'll come back to you on that.
First of all, can I begin by thanking the officer for a very comprehensive report, very helpful report in terms of the drainage of the site, which I know featured very extensively, I think, in our discussions last time. I did try an attempt to read the 120, 130 page report, but I must admit I found it more than more than a struggle. But it's raised, I think, some interesting questions that we didn't really go into last time, and I think we ought to consider as part of the review of the application. Now, I note that this detention basin or pond now has sort of figured quite prominently in our discussions this evening, and that seems to me to raise some questions, Chair. First of all, I'd like to know about the size of this basin or pond, its depth. I understand that they are now becoming quite a fixture of developments, but it does seem to raise some sort of safety and maintenance issues in my mind. Putting a pond on a residential development is, well, let's say there could be some issues with that. So I'd very much welcome officers' comments on that application of the that aspect of the application. Like Councillor Williams, I do struggle, and I continue to struggle, how a site that is sort of designated as part of a green heritage, as open space, how that can actually be the subject of a development application. What does that title mean? Because it doesn't seem to mean anything in terms of conservation. And I think I struggle with that, Chair. And I mean, and looking at some of the objections that we've had from residents, I think other people struggle with that. So I am really quite supportive of Councillor Williams's remarks on that. The other issue in the report that I think I would challenge to some extent is this this idea that people don't feel loyalty to a certain open space in their location. You know, we've been told, and it's perfectly true, that the Marsh and the Brampton are quite near. But I mean, if you try and walk from Hempstalls to those sites, you have to cross at least 2 major roads. It's not easy if you're taking young children, and it's not easy actually if you're taking dogs. So I think one of the results really of the loss of 2.48 hectares of open space, which is what will happen if the application is approved, is that many people living around Hempstalls will lose access to green space which they enjoy and they value. And I think that is something which ought to concern the Borough Council. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gorton. Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Chair. But today in the news, we've been promised by the government everyone will live within a 15 walk of a green space or water under new plans to protect wildlife and restore nature. Ballsfield teems with wildlife, and if we allow this planning application, it will make a complete mockery of these plans to help nature. Parents, grandparents and children will have to cross busy roads to reach any of these open spaces mentioned in this report. I'm sure the agency who did this report didn't have to contend with prams or pushchairs holding children's hands while trying to cross extremely busy roads. I question whether they even moved away from their computers. I will not be supporting this application. To celebrate our 850 years, could we not protect this field and lead the way towards restoring and protecting our open spaces for a future generation and wildlife? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Councillor Fear.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And again, I'd like to thank the officers for a very thorough report. And one of the things I note in this, I mean, again, and last time, quite rightly, concerns about green space have been arranged, but looking at those photographs, and again, I'm sure we can show those photographs again if need be, it seems to me that a very large amount of green space will be left. I mean, we talk about an application site, and I noticed the officer was talking about a small amount, a small hectareage of that site remaining green space, but in fact, adjacent to it, outside of that application site, there is a very large piece of green space. So we need to have a holistic attitude to this and not just concentrate on the area marked out in this proposal for development, but actually to look at things which are adjacent to it, because it makes no sense to take this just by itself. I know again that drainage has been a concern, and rightly so. Like Councillor Gorton, I'm afraid the technicalities of drainage are not my special subject, but I am happy to defer to those whose special subject it is. And it seems to me that what this is saying is that drainage can be handled by condition there. And indeed, if those conditions are not discharged, the development will not go ahead. So I think we can assuage ourselves in that regard. Two other things that strike me. One, as a historian, obviously, I'm delighted to see that there will be a proper watching brief on the archaeology. As a Roman historian, I think it is very important to remind people that Roman roads are not normally ones with large paved stone blocks. It would in fact be rammed gravel. It most certainly should be investigated, but it's not a huge heritage asset in perhaps the way that Roman road with the normal photographs in books from Italy tends to project to ourselves. So that is something. My last worry, and this is for a future meeting, not for the principle of development, which I am minded to support, is looking at that indicative drawing, particularly on one of those developments, the large numbers of properties on unadopted highways. Those people, of course, who purchase such properties would have to take their bins to an adopted highway. And I did a little quick count on one side, and it looked like half the properties involved there were of that sort. And in my opinion, that is not acceptable. And when this comes back, if that's not changed, I will most certainly be holding forth about that. Nevertheless, this evening is not about those issues. And as I see it at the moment, there is no good reason for us to reject this, and I am minded to support this application.
Thank you, Councillor Fear. Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Chair. In looking at this and looking over the report, I think when this came before us at the last meeting, I raised my concerns about the open space policy and how it was being used, and raised the same concerns I have now, that some of the green spaces or open spaces that are listed as spaces within the 15-minute distance from the site are sites such as the Whammy. And I raised concern last time round that the Whammy is not 15 minutes from the site. And it's certainly not 15 minutes or a very pleasant walk if you're taking small kids, a pram, dogs, to have to walk down, cross one of the busiest roads in the borough, and then descend down Milehouse Lane, which is a second very busy road in the borough, to get to the Whammy, eventually get to the Whammy, having gone down and then back up the hill again, and then down the hill again. It just seems absolutely crazy. Now, I don't blame officers in preparation of this report. They can only work with the policies that they have, but that's why these reports come to committee. And I think it is incumbent on us to look at open space policies and say, this just makes absolutely no sense, because we're the custodians and guardians of this green space. And certainly if you're looking, I'm looking across to my colleague, Councillor Moffat, who's got Google Maps open, and I look there and I see the green space in proximity. One rather large green space is actually private. It's Woolstanton Golf Course, so I don't think we can include that within the assessment. There's Woolstanton Marsh, and then there's that piece of green space that Councillor Fear referred to. I'm quite concerned about taking that piece of green space and we look at green spaces, because that's private land that's on a lease to an educational facility. It currently has fencing around it. It's already been commented on by officers that some parts of that fencing are accessible. But at any point, that fencing could be inaccessible, making that green space inaccessible to residents in the area. So I choose not to consider that to be an accessible green space, because at any point it could be taken out of access. A green space in private ownership that is currently being leased for 125 years to an educational establishment, all reasons that I could see that that land could be fenced off permanently with lack of access. So removal of this green space essentially means that a resident adjacent to that, should they wish to walk their dog, apart from the mediocre amount of green space there, which if you have a larger breed dog, looking at those pictures, you're not going to get much exercise, is to take the dog to Woolstanton Marsh, or to take the trek across a very busy road, down Milehouse Lane, up past Morrison's, down again to the Whammy. I just don't think that that's reasonable. I really don't think that that's reasonable. And I understand the officer's recommendation based on the policy. I completely understand that. But I think that in this case, when we look at it, we have to really say, are we, for the sake of a policy, going to remove the only viable green space in the area for residents to undertake large recreational activities? Personally, I agree with Councillor Williams. I would support Councillor Williams' objection. And I really hope that members like me can look through this the open space policy and realise that it really isn't functional to our residents' needs. Thank you, Chair.
Doesn't appear to be any other. Oh, Councillor Sweeney.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, a couple of things really. There seems to be a lot of interest in the green space. I wasn't at the original meeting, but it seems to me, like Councillor Fear says, there's quite a large area that isn't going to be built on because it's leased to school for 125 years, or 115 years is left now. So that's one thing. I'm not convinced that the the Woolstanton Marsh is really that far away. I agree with the one about the Whammy. That is a good way, but I don't think you pick it that far either. And I think Woolstanton Marsh is literally just up the road. I'm not a big dog walker myself, but I just don't think the amount of space there is hugely detrimental by this thing being built. I wonder if the officer could say how big is the site that is leased to Woolstanton School? I'm assuming it looks like sort of 40% of the site or something like that. Yeah, it's quite a sizable site, isn't it? No, okay, right. That's all. Thank you.
Councillor Chris.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was just with the land that is leased to the school. Are people, although it said it's fenced off and there's holes in the fence, are people actually going onto that bit as well and walking the dogs and doing things with a sort of and the school are kind of okay with this? Is that part of the movement of people there? And I suppose if this gets built, are there plans to actually put a proper fence in, and then that will not be accessible? Just trying to get an idea of the how people use that particular spot as well.
At the present time, you can see there's some holes in the fence, and and I think you can even see from this plan here, there's sort of informal paths sort of going through it. I think the agent said it's intended to keep it as an informal area. I haven't got that confirmed, but I can only base that on what he said earlier.
Yeah, if I could just a brief comment. I live very close to this piece of land, and it's used every weekend for football teams who train and play on the land. And yes, dog walkers do use that in combination with the application site. Yeah.
Councillor Bryan.
Thanks, Chair. Just following on questions. So are the school okay with people using that piece of land? Does anyone mind them being used for that purpose? Did they get in and out of it through a hole in the fence? No.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Councillor Jones, then Councillor Chris.
Just a point of clarification on that. Could you clarify that as land in private ownership, at any point, should the school wish to, or the county council, they could restrict public access to that site without any recourse to us in any way?
Yes, I agree.
Thank you, Chairman. Just about the land. So is the school actually, there's a border there, so you can't wander onto the school ground while you're on the field. There's a distinctive fence or something. So if you're playing football, would the ball hit the school window, or are they quite separate entities?
There is a clear demarcation there, and there is a boundary there, which I think, looking at it from a distance, it is quite a reasonable size fence. So it is, it is self-contained, and they'll have their own security measures anyway. So I'm sure that they wouldn't have allowed people to gain access. The schools are very strict these days.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Can I just ask again, in the flooding and drainage section, we read the southeastern part of the site is shown at being of risk of flooding from the Lyme Brook and associated overland flows. Is that covered further on when you said how you were planning to address this? or is this something that's still outstanding? And can I just ask again clarification on the report says it's recommended that further archaeological work is undertaken to better understand and characterize any below ground archaeological features within the application site. Is that not something that we could do before we make a decision? Or is this something that gets done before a final decision is made? I'm just not clear on that one. And I don't know if this is relevant to this meeting, but when you showed the proposed houses, you had 2, 3, 4, and 5 bedroom houses, but the person from Staffordshire Council mentioned some flats, which having a second, a third, and possibly a fourth floor flats overlooking possible school and a nursery isn't very good for the privacy of the children. I'm just wondering if your idea for the houses is, why is that different to the Staffordshire County idea of flats? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hutchinson. Councillor Moffat.
Thanks, Chair. It's just an observation, really, that I mean, as recently as, well, less than a year ago, we've got kind of images of Newcastle Borough Council Cabinet agreeing to protect huge tracts of urban green space as urban carbon capture areas, etc. So we're publicising our ambition as a borough, actually, to protect green urban space, and everything about this development, including the selling off of this green space, this public green space, just seems very contrary to the ambitions that we're stating on one hand. And for all of the reasons that various people have mentioned, I'm really not inclined to support this proposal at all.
Thank you, Councillor Moffat. Right, I think we got a flavour of where we're going on that. Councillor Williams, would you like to outline your proposal, please? I think I've got the one from. Correct me if I'm wrong, but you're removing grounds for refusal on loss of open space.
Yes, I am.
Is there anything else,
Mr. Chairman? But in that, it's a green heritage network. It's the end of the local plan that the land on Hume Avenue is part, and it's protected by the green heritage network. That's one of my reasons. The other reason, within the photographs, you see that the grass has been cut. It's not usually that thin. And it's unique in the sense against the marsh has been mentioned, Pecky, and other pieces of land in Bradwell, supposedly within the walking distance, are manicured piece of land. This land in Hume Avenue is not. It's unique for wildlife. It hasn't been, I don't think it's ever been ploughed. Well, they haven't touched it for the last 50 years, as I know to. So you can imagine the wildlife that's there, and also the flowers that grow in there. So that's really my argument, my point on the piece of land, how different against, and I can't think of any other pieces of land in the borough, open access land, that's unique in this way. So that's one of my reasons for refusal, as well as it's on the green heritage network that has been stated that we're hoping to protect. But if this is given permission, we're not protecting. So
thank you, Councillor Williams.
2 reasons. Thanks, Chair.
Do we have a seconder for Councillor Williams's proposal? Councillor Gorton. So we'll now take a vote on refusal first, and then I'll take the Councillor Fear's proposal next. Can I see a show of hands, please, in support of Councillor Williams's proposal?
Chair, we need to obviously be clear on the reasons for refusal. Can I suggest that we actually come back to you at the next meeting with those in detail? I don't really want to do it on the hoof because there are some technical issues we just need to get our heads around.
Okay.
So we're taking that on the basis of a refusal. So we'll come back for reasons relating to the open space and the heritage. Thank you, Chair.
Next item on the agenda is item 5, to be found in pages 27 to 34 of your agenda pack. Application for major development, land north of Pepper Street, Kiel.
Thank you, Chair. So this application previously came before the committee on the 8th of November. The application is to remove condition 21 of the original planning permission for the site. Sorry, just bear with me. For the site off Pepper Street in Kiel, which was granted planning permission for 100 houses. The item was deferred to allow officers to liaise with environmental health officers to consider appropriate wording for a variation of the condition. The condition relates to the prevention of the use of impact piling, and the application was to remove that condition. We've had discussions with environmental health officers, and you'll see in the report that the recommendation is now to vary that condition rather than to remove it, to allow piling works, but with a maximum noise threshold, and that the works be limited to within certain hours. So just show members as a reminder. So this is the site, Pepper Street here, and Quarry Bank is this road here. So the houses that are mainly affected, or the houses that are closest to the site, are these ones here on Pepper Street and just around the corner onto Quarry Bank, and these houses here also on Pepper Street. So we've got some photos of those houses. So this is the site on the right hand side. This is Pepper Street, and these are the houses that are on Pepper Street, just close to that junction with Quarry Bank. So this is getting closer along to, this is the junction here just after the car. So that's the house that's right on the corner, the junction with Quarry Bank. That's a closer one, just looking out from Quarry Bank over. This is the site over here. And these are the houses past the junction, also on Pepper Street, but yeah, the other side of the junction with Quarry Bank. So additional information was requested from the agent, and they suggested appropriate noise thresholds and a restriction on hours. And they also set out that noise monitoring would be undertaken by a specialist consultant, and in the event of complaints, the results of the monitoring would be forwarded to the LPA to deal with as appropriate. So those details have been reviewed by our environmental health officers, and they're satisfied that on the basis of the wording of the condition that's in the agenda report. So that's saying that all piling work shall have a maximum noise threshold for the closest noise sensitive properties, and that the piling work shall be limited to those times that are set out there. Environmental health are satisfied that there would be no adverse impact on living conditions. So this is not an application for the development of the site that has been approved some time ago. It is an application simply to vary the wording of one of the conditions attached to that planning permission. All of the other conditions, of which there are many, would remain. There are a couple of conditions that are relevant. One relates to vibration. So there's a condition on the original permission that requires a construction method statement, and that should include details relating to control of noise and vibration emissions from construction activities. So that one would still remain. And then there's another condition about piling or any other foundation design using penetrative methods is not permitted other than with the written consent of the LPA. And that's relating to risks to groundwater. So all of the other conditions would remain. It's just simply a variation of this one condition, condition 21. Thank you.
I'd like to thank our officer for that presentation. Just to remind members, in case it's not clear, that this isn't to refuse planning permission, it's to vary a condition. I have an objector to this scheme. I have no supporters of this, and I believe it's Mr. Graham Bibby, who's representing Keele Parish Council. Would you like to come forward, Mr. Bibby? Take a seat there, please. You have 3 minutes to make your speech. When you're ready to commence, press the button in front of you and the red light should come on.
Keele Parish Council have broadly supported the application to build on the land north of Pep Street since it was first suggested. We have experience of working with Seddon, whose development in the village has been a model of responsible development. Nevertheless, I have, my fellow councillors and residents have, some concerns about this application to permit piling. In the first case, one assumes that when the original outline planning permission was given and the reserved matters determined, the removal of the permission to pile was for good reason, and indeed the houses will be close to the site. Principally, firstly, however, having read through all of the documentation, the reason given for seeking to permit piling is that the development would not be financially sustainable without that permission. And yet nowhere is there any modelling of alternative approaches to piling. So, for instance, the Betts report, the geological report on the site, notes that the land north of the fault line, and I trust none of this piling is planned on the land north of the fault line, is not suitable for piling, and rafts would need to be used for construction. Now, if rafts can be used in that section of the site, why could they not be used elsewhere? Presumably because they'd be financially unsustainable. And yet no argument is presented, no financial data is presented. Nevertheless, let's assume that we're going to permit piling on the site. We note that board piling will be used to develop most of the foundations, will be used in a small number of houses, but most of the piling will be concrete driven piling. That gives some advantages. The piling will be intermittent, half an hour at most, then a pause for 30 minutes and a recommencement. Only 3 plots per day would be done. It would be continuous for a week, but with a 4-month break between such instances. I would request that that be written into any permission. That's taken from the Wardle report. Secondly, the Betts geological assessment notes that there are a couple of sites where there are toxic waste, cyanides, volatile organics that should be removed because of the dangers of water penetration. I would request that that be included in the condition so that we know those materials have been removed. And finally, there is a report from Charles Winnett about
Mr. Bibby, can you wrap things up, please? Because
yeah,
you're over your 3 minutes now.
about vibrational risks on the site, and yet this condition doesn't mention vibration at all. And I would like that to be written in. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Bibby. You can return to your seat, please. Would our officers like to respond to that, please?
Just in terms of the financial justification for the scheme, if we haven't requested information on the financial viability, because we consider that the proposal to vary that condition is acceptable. If we had concerns about that and felt that it was unacceptable and they wished to submit financial viability information to seek to justify it further, then potentially we could have done that. But in the circumstances, environmental health is saying that they have no objections and that there won't be any impact on residential amenities. So we have no reason to request that information. We could certainly, in wording the varied condition, we could require that the piling works are carried out in accordance with that the timing that's set out within that report. And in relation to the reference to vibration, that is within one of the other conditions within the outline permission that I did refer to earlier. Thank you.
I'll offer it over to members now, please. Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Chair. I know this site exceptionally well. It falls within my ward. I walk that area quite regularly. It's between my house and my parents' house. When this came to committee last time, I moved refusal and was unfortunately not supported in that. I'm not convinced that by the financial viability argument, and I made that clear in moving refusal, but there wasn't support for that. I was one of the voices behind the recommendation of looking at varying this condition to include protections for adverse sound. I'm a little bit disappointed. I don't feel this is quite a reflection of what was asked for. I remember when we agreed that, and it was agreed that officers would go away and look at this, the recommendation that we set that level by what our environmental health would set that level at, preferably statutory nuisance, not the level set by the applicant, which I think is the wrong way to go about this. We've essentially asked the applicant, what noise can you do? And our environmental health has said, well, that's okay. And it may seem okay, but I've had a quick look at things, and 65 decibels, 15-minute LEC or dBA is actually higher than what we would consider to be a statutory nuisance. We consider a statutory nuisance legally to be 34 decibels. And yet this has been set at 65 decibels. And I don't think that is quite reflective of what was asked at the last planning committee when we asked officers to go away and look at that level. I think 65 decibels is excessive. I think if we're saying that 34 decibels is a statutory nuisance, 65 decibels is in excess of that, not by a small amount, but by a large amount. I would agree with, and I'm glad that that the officer raised that we could go back and set the outline schedule of piling works. I disagree that any move has been made on times. Those are the same times that we were presented with last time. If we were to approve this condition, we would be saying that this piling work could occur any time between 8 o'clock in the morning, 6 o'clock on Monday to Friday, and 8 to 1 on a Saturday. So we do need to have that schedule in, because we know the problem with a noise nuisance isn't a singular threshold noise, because 65 decibels as a singular threshold noise isn't that much of an issue to sensitive receptors. What we want to avoid is long-term ongoing noise. That's when it becomes a nuisance. Much like the odor nuisance that we have to deal with, a single acute odor is less of a problem compared to an ongoing persistent odor. And it's the same with this noise. I made comment last time, I'm quite familiar with the noise of piling works. I've worked next to a site where piling works was undertaken within this borough. It is a nuisance. I found it difficult to work in that building. I ended up working from home a significant amount of that time. I don't want to see residents in that area because they don't have the opportunity to work at home. They are at home. And if they're faced with that noise ongoing between those hours at that threshold, then it is going to be a nuisance and we're going to have to deal with that. I'm a little bit concerned about how we would review. So if there is a problem, we would contact the companies, the developers, consultants who would then tell us their monitoring data. And then we would, as a council, decide what we would do about that. I feel that that's a concern for me. What's the time frame behind that? I think it's quite woolly. It doesn't really trigger into any mechanisms. I think quite clearly, last time round, I said that if there is a breach of thresholds, then work should stop on site, which is what you would expect of a condition that's protecting the local residents. So I'll leave it for now to listen to if other councillors have comments to make. I know a number of other councillors were also at the meeting previously and also had some concerns. So I'm quite happy to listen before making a recommendation on this. I would like to reserve, if one councillor is moving to accept, I would like to reserve the ability to ensure that we amend the condition appropriately as previously commented, and as the officer has said, it would be reasonable to amend to accept the timeframes outlined by the Wardle report. Thank you.
Any councillors wishing to speak? Councillor Fear.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. This is obviously an awkward thing. Manifestly, it seems to me that noise from piling will be a nuisance. There's no escape from that. Nonetheless, it is a temporary nuisance. It also does not affect a large community, and the hours for the piling are within the working day when one can realistically expect that a number of those householders will not be present at that time as well. It seems to me that we need to think about proportionality here a little bit, and I am inclined to vote for the proposal that we have in front of us, simply because this needs to be done. I don't think what we're proposing is it's going to be incessant and continuous. And I also think that for quite a number of people there, they actually won't be present when this thing is going on. So it's, I don't want to pretend that people won't notice this, because manifestly they will notice this, but there won't be that many people. And I know, and I'm perfectly prepared to accept that those who are there will notice this, but nonetheless, it's not incessant. It's not continuous. There are things in the proposal for breaks in between it. So I think that as amendments go, this is a proportionate response. And in that respect, I'm inclined to vote for the recommendation.
Yeah. Any other councillors wish to speak? Councillor Williams and Councillor Crisp.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Yes, I am in favour of the piling, but with the recommendations that Councillor Jones has put forward. And we need to talk that through. And if you wouldn't mind repeating what his thoughts are. But how times have changed. I'll just make a bit not light of it, but when they built the A34, where I live in Crossheath, we had about years ago piling of discriminate times of the day and bang, bang, bang. So I think things have improved, and I do have sympathy with the residents and with the gentleman from Keel Parish Council. But I'd like Councillor Jones just to just to repeat what he did say that he would agree to if we accepted this recommendation.
Councillor Crisp.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to echo Councillor Fear, really, and also I believe the actual amount of time this will be going on is relatively short. How many out of the whole construction process? How many days are you actually talking about?
Well, it's proposed to take place for 1 week at a time, and on each day 3 plots would be piled. So 3 plots per day, Monday to Friday. So 15 plots in that week. Then there would be a 4-month break. Then it would start again. So another 15 plots in that week. So if there's 100, 15, 37, yeah, 7. So there'll be 7 weeks, but obviously within a much longer period because there's a 4-month break between each of those weeks.
Thank you, Chair. The amendment that I would suggest is to include piling to be undertaken as per the time schedule in the is it the Wardle? Yeah, in the Wardle report, which is the schedule that our officer has just outlined. I would be happy to actually move the recommendation with that inclusion of that amendment.
Second that.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Councillor Fear, would you agree to that in your proposal?
I think so. And if the officer could just explain how that differs. I mean, Councillor Jones referred to the officer saying that was the time frame. So I'm not quite sure now what the difference is.
It's, I think, what Councillor Jones was referring to in the condition, the wording that's set out in the agenda report. It says it refers to the maximum noise threshold, says the hours of operation, but doesn't make reference to the fact that it's going to be for 1 week. Then there'll be a break of 4 months, then another week. And that is set out within a report that's been submitted by Wardell's. So what I was suggesting was that we could include within that condition that it should take place in accordance with the time frame that's set out in that report.
No, yes, Mr. Chairman, I'm happy to accept that.
Bull to you, Councillor Jones. Okay, in that case then, it's been proposed by Councillor Fear, seconded by Councillor Crisp. Are you still happy to second that proposal as per the amendments just mentioned? Yes. Your name's Mr. Crisp? Are you sure? Okay. To support that. And that's unanimous. That item's clearly passed. Okay, we're all right with that. Okay. Thank you. Brings us to item 6 now, to be found on pages 35 to 50 of your information pack. The application for major development, the former Clayton Lodge Hotel, Clayton Road, Newcastle. We have a
Thank you, Chair. It's going for you. Okay, so this application is for full planning permission for the demolition of the former Clayton Lodge Hotel and redevelopment of the site for 48 dwellings, associated landscaping and access works. The application site is within the urban area of Newcastle and is considered to represent a sustainable location for residential development. It's within close proximity to services, amenities and employment opportunities. The site also represents previously developed land, which the NPPF states planning decisions should give substantial weight to its redevelopment. So on the screen now, you've got the layout of the site. A new access is proposed to be created off Clayton Road. The properties within the site consist of semi-detached and detached dwellings mainly of 2 stories in height, but with some 2.5-storey properties just to add variety to the street scene. Amended plans have been received during the application process. Those were at officers' request to address issues with regards to residential amenity within the northern aspect of the site with properties along Kingsdown Mews, and also to provide enhancements in terms of landscaping within the site. So these plans here are 3 street scene elevations from within various viewpoints of the site. So the first street scene here is a view taken from Clayton Road, looking directly at the site frontage. So this here is the main access road that would be created and properties either side of that. The second street scene view here is dwellings on the northern side of the main access road. Again, just showing you the variety of house types and styles there. And then the final image is the properties along the western boundary of the site. So that's the very rear of the site. So now it's just a few images from in and around. So this view here is taken from Clayton Road, looking, as you can see there, towards the existing petrol station. The proposed access is to be just off this screen to the left. So here again, you can see the existing site. A couple of images here from within the site, just showing the state of the existing building. This division here is from the northern most part of the site. So this is the boundary here shared with Kingsdown Mews. And this image here is taken from a field from the Our Lady in St. Werburgh's Church. So this is looking at the western boundary of the site here. And again, from the same viewpoint, but this shows you the properties along Waverley Close and sort of this cluster of landscaping that's existing in the southwestern corner of the site. So we've just rattled through sort of the key issues. So the scheme is considered to represent a high quality design. It will vastly improve the existing appearance of the site in terms of its redevelopment. The scale and design of the properties will integrate well with the surrounding area. Changes submitted during the course of the application have addressed officers' concerns regarding separation distances, with a particular focus on the rear elevations of proposed properties that will face out onto Kingsdown Mews. All other elements of the scheme have acceptable levels of amenity, suitable size gardens, etc. The site is host to a number of large trees. Trying to find some image. I've got some other images from within the site. There will be loss of trees from central parts of the site and along the western boundary. However, these trees are of mixed quality, and it's considered that on balance, the benefits of redeveloping the site and the ambitious landscaping scheme that accompanies the development will outweigh the loss of those trees. There are no objections from the Highway Authority in terms of the access and internal road layout. A supporting ecological impact assessment has identified that the habitats on site are largely of low ecological value, but they have acknowledged that there may be implications on birds, bats and hedgehogs. So within that, there is a robust and detailed mitigation scheme, which we can suitably agree through conditions. So on that basis, we believe that there would be no harm to biodiversity or habitats as a result of the development. There is a financial contribution required towards travel plan monitoring and primary education. But on this occasion, there is no affordable housing to be provided on the site. The applicant has submitted along with the application a vacant building credit statement. This is something that is supported by the MPPF to support the redevelopment of vacant buildings. That assessment has gone into detail in terms of the nature of the vacancy of that building, its gross floor space, and on the basis that the buildings to be developed are no larger than the floor space to be lost. That has led to no affordable housing being required. So to conclude, the development is in a highly sustainable location. It makes good use of previously developed land. It is of high quality design that would be a significant improvement over the current appearance of the site, and that would provide notable economic, social and environmental benefits in addition to provisions towards borough housing supply. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jones, for the presentation. Next, we have a a speaker against the proposal? Councillor Andrew Parker, would you like to take your seat at the front, please? And sorry, against? I stand corrected in the absence of any information.
Yes, I will not be objecting this because I thought heartily welcome this for a number of years now. We've had to look at this unpleasant eyesore, which has been subject to arson and vandalism. But it doesn't only affect just my and Councillor Fear's ward, it also affects Councillor Sweeney's ward of Clayton and Councillor Heason's ward of the Westlands, because it backs on to all three. Yes, I understand that there are a number of objections from residents, but I'm glad that the developers have revised this application and that they have come back and they have listened to what people have said and representations that have been made. And moving forward, this is a promising development, and I hope that members will heed what the officer has said in the report that's been put out before them and propose and support this application. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Parker. I believe we now have the applicant who'd like to speak in favour of this. Rachel Bibby. You have 3 minutes to address the committee. Start whenever you're ready, pressing the red button in front of you.
Chair and members of the committee, thank you for allowing me to speak this evening. I am the Senior Land and Planning Manager for Lyme Court Homes and speak in support of the application before you. We propose to redevelop the site to deliver 48 new homes. We purchased the site in March 2022. At the time of the purchase, the hotel has been closed for some time and subject to arson and antisocial behaviour. Since our ownership, we've improved the security presence on site, but unfortunately, this has not prevented the antisocial behaviour which is taking place each day, causing distress to local residents, and unnecessary strain on police resources. Prior to the submission of this application, we entered into pre-application discussions with your officers and presented the scheme to an independent design review panel. The scheme has evolved following these discussions and in response to consultee responses. We've completed a structural survey of the buildings, which concludes that part of the premises are not structurally sound for retention, and we propose to remove all of the buildings on the site. Vehicle access will remain onto Clayton Road. Your highway officers support the proposal and agree that the vehicle use generated from the development is comparable to the existing use as a hotel with conferencing facilities. Safe highway access can therefore be achieved without compromising highway safety. The development has been designed in a perimeter block arrangement with suitable garden sizes to enable adequate amenity space for future residents and suitable back-to-back distance with existing residents. The drainage strategy proposed a gravity-fed system for surface and foul water. The LLFA support the greenfield discharge rate of 4.8 litres per second, which includes the use of an attenuation basin. To enable the development, tree removal primarily within the centre of the site is required. To mitigate for this loss, we propose new tree planting throughout the development with the inclusion of tree-lined streets and tree planting to the perimeter of the site to ensure that future residents' privacy is maintained. Lyme Court pride themselves on a high standard of design and have successfully achieved the 5-star HBF award for 8 consecutive years. We adopt a fabric-first approach to construction with high levels of insulation, enhanced ventilation, reduced water usage and airtight houses, keeping energy demand low. Each home have their own EV charging points, cycle storage and off-street car parking. The design of the dwellings reflect the architectural style of properties on Clayton Road, constructed from red brick with dark grey roof tiles. I strongly believe that the proposals in front of you enhance the character of the area and put a stop to antisocial behaviour which is taking place on a daily occurrence. It has been a positive experience working with your officers, and to achieve the scheme in front of you today, I hope that you are able to support the application in accordance with your officer's recommendation. Thank you. Resume
now. Okay, I'll hand it over to the floor. Councillors wishing to speak, please indicate. Councillor Jones, followed by Councillor Sweeney.
Thank you, Chair. I think this is a good application to see. I think we all are aware of the site. It's on a main road coming in and out of the town, and we've seen it fall into disarray. And I agree that this will be a very good use of the site. Looking through the plans, they look lovely. I think the actual development itself will enhance green spaces. It's creating better green spaces on a brownfield site, which is an exciting outcome for us as an authority. I just wanted to query, and it could just be that I've forgotten the trigger points for 106 contributions, but as I was looking down, there isn't any 106 contribution to green spaces or social housing. Is that due to the size of the development only being 48 properties or dwellings? Sorry, I was just unsure of that. I entirely support this development, but I just was querying why there was no 106 for social housing provision or contribution or green space provision. If the officers could answer that.
In terms of the affordable housing, I think we'd mentioned they've submitted the vacant building statement. So within that, they have identified that because they are demolishing a vacant building, the gross floor area of that building is more than the buildings that are to be produced. So there is sort of a net loss in terms of floor area. So on that basis, there is no requirement to provide that affordable housing. It's supported within the MPPF. We are happy that the report the applicants have put forward is thorough and robust, and have gone with their recommendation on that. We'll get back to you on the query about the public open space. Just check that.
To permit, subject to clarification on that.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Councillor Sweeney, then Councillor Fear.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. This isn't actually in my ward, but the other side of the road is. And like Councillor Jones says, it's been an eyesore for a while. One thing, a contribution of £10,000 towards travel plan monitoring. I'd like to know what that actually means, but I'll come back to more things. If you go towards the back of the report, you'll see a map, a sort of street map type thing. And on that, if you look at the road, you probably won't read them actually because it's small, but there's a thing called Waveney and there's one called Paragon. If you sort of look at the size of those two roads and look at the size of this development, it's broadly similar and a broadly similar number of houses, which suggests to me this is a development that's not cramming loads and loads of things into a tiny space with no gardens. It looks quite a well set out estate. It's worth looking at as that picture. In an ideal world, the fire wouldn't have happened, and this could sort of be incorporated into the old building in Clayton, which is a bit of the old part of Clayton Lodge, which is quite a stylish building, but it's too late for that now. But I absolutely support this, and anybody who objects to it, what do you want on there? Do you want a burnt out ruin with people using drugs, people doing all sorts of unpleasant things there, or do you want a decent new estate? And I absolutely support this, and I have put my name to it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Sweeney. Councillor Fear, then Councillor Gordon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, this is, I think, a very welcome application. Clayton Lodge, the site, it's been a rather unhappy history for a number of years now. Derelict for a period of time, attracting antisocial behaviour, which may well have been, of course, a contributing factor to the fire. And again, as Councillor Sweeney says, it's a great shame that the old lodge building at the back was the focus of that fire. That was a building of some history in the borough, but the photograph we saw, you could see the blackened timbers there. It's not, unfortunately, salvageable. And we do need to remove the antisocial behaviour. I mean, to be honest with you, even prior to that, the hotel's last incarnation, it wasn't a particularly good neighbour. There were lots of complaints about noisy parties at the New Year, as it was desperately trying to create money, of course. So I think this is the best solution. Looking at previous applications, because again, those of us who have been around a bit will know that there's been many attempts to redevelop this. I do think this is a very good one. In the past, people have tried to put lots of blocks of flats on there. They've tried to push the building line right up to Clayton Road. Here we don't have either of those things. I think we have quite a sympathetic development. I'd also like to agree with my colleague, Councillor Parker, that the developer has listened to representation. So around the area of Kingsdown Mews, for example, the current proposals now have moved the properties away to create a little bit more privacy there. So I think this is very good news indeed. The only perhaps concern that I know some residents have had has been about the loss of habitat and such like. And I'd just like a little bit of assurance from the officer about the western boundary of the site. There I know some material will be removed, but I also, I hope I'm correct in saying that there will be a very good planting scheme there. And I think the important thing there for us is to make sure that the planting there is of native and a variety of species to allow wildlife to go back into that area and recolonize it after the development has happened. But I think this is a very welcome development, and I would urge colleagues to support it. And again, I would echo what Councillor Sweeney has said. If we leave this here, really, we are guilty of allowing an antisocial problem to fester, and we really don't want to do that, do we?
Councillor Fear, Councillor Gorton.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I can only agree. It is a most impressive application. I do, however, have sort of three questions. The first one has sort of been answered by Councillor Sweeney and Councillor Fear, which is about the state of the lodge, and is there anything there that could be sort of survive, anything there that could sort of be protected? I was a little surprised when I got the report that there didn't seem to be anything from the conservation officer about really, is there anything that can be protected, or is it really reached the stage, unfortunately, where we're just going to have to let it go? I mean, some of the letters are from objectors do refer to it being a listed building, and I've certainly read that the lodge did have Victorian features, and it's a sort of shame that, you know, that it would have been helpful, I think, to have had confirmation from the conservation officer really that nothing can be protected because of the vandalism and the damage. Perhaps another point that I note from the application is that our own landscape section cannot condone the removal of healthy trees from the centre of the site, and the applicant claims that the site would not be financially or physically viable if these trees were retained. And I suppose my question is, have our officers, have the Borough Council sort of tested or questioned that, or has it just been accepted? And the final point I would make is, note we haven't got anyone from highways to talk about sort of road safety matters, but and it's been many years since my children went to Clayton High, but I seem to remember that there was a crossing point quite close to this site that was very well used by students of the high school who were going backwards and forwards from Westbury Park. And I'm just wondering whether, if the development goes ahead, whether there are sort of pedestrian road safety issues that we perhaps the authority ought to bear in mind. But apart from that, I think we've heard a very persuasive case in support of the application.
Thank you, Councillor Gorton. I'll take Councillor Heatson, and then we'll ask the officers to come back. Councillor Heatson.
Yeah, again, I'm in support of this. I do have a query, and it may have been raised in previous meetings. I've just not been in the previous meetings. But have highways actually looked at the, the traffic light system there on the Sacker Crossroads? by the Seabridge Lane going onto Clayton Road and vice versa? Have they looked at a filter system there? Because with the best will in the world, anybody living on that development who are taking the children to school, to primary schools, will invariably be turning into Seabridge Lane from there, because the two main primary schools are either on Seabridge Lane or off Seabridge Lane. And when they come to turn right, to come out of Seabridge Lane and onto Clayton Road, they'll be waiting an awfully long time because the lights have changed red before you can actually get out. Now, I don't know if that's a consideration. I know it's not a huge development, but I think it is a concern.
Thank you, Councillor Hewson. Would officers like to come back on the questions raised? Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So I'll go to Councillor Heason's query there in terms of capacity of the junctions. The application is accompanied by a transport assessment, and that looks at issues in terms of capacity at nearby junctions. The Highway Authority have stated that the increased traffic flow onto Clayton Road will be minimal, and no junctions have been identified as requiring capacity assessment as a result of the development. So we have gone with their assessment in terms of that impact. In terms of the queries, in terms of the conservation area and impact of the heritage of that building, it isn't a designated heritage asset. It's not something that would be listed by us as a council. That would be something that would be controlled by Historic England. It is not within the conservation area, but officers have identified within the report that actually the redevelopment of the site would in fact enhance any setting of the conservation area because of the current sort of dilapidated state of the building. So officers are satisfied that there wouldn't be any impact with those issues. In terms of trees, I can, I don't know if I can share this screen. Just share this with you. So this here is Clayton Road, just at the bottom of your screen there, and the sort of hatched red circles are the trees that are to be removed. So the landscape section have objected to this large cluster that is to be removed here. Within the tree survey, most of those trees are category B, category C trees to be in fair condition. So some do make a contribution to the visual amenities of the area, but the majority are of fairly standard condition. And with the ambitious landscaping that they propose in terms of the replanting here, there's lots of new trees to be planted along this boundary, new native hedgerows, mixed grasslands, shrubbery. I'll get the landscaping plans up there for you just so you can see. So all of this area here is to be replanted, new trees along the entirety of this boundary here, which is the western boundary. Apologies, flicking through those. And again, you can see this planting carries on along the entirety of this rear boundary. New hedgerow, native hedgerow along this northern boundary here by Kingsdown Mews. New tree planting. Again, the existing trees that are to be retained are enhanced with new planting. So on balance, there is a loss. It's unfortunate, but the benefits in terms of the redevelopment of the site alongside that landscaping scheme we feel are sufficient to outweigh the loss of those trees.
Could I make the suggestion that we ask the developer to replace some of the trees on the back part of the development with substantial trees that aren't just conifers, that they're actually worthwhile trees?
Yeah, so there are species listed within the report. The landscape section haven't raised any objections to the species that are to be planted. What we could potentially condition if members felt it was necessary was the status of those trees. So i.e. we could perhaps plant some more mature trees rather than sort of young saplings.
Thank you. I think we've got enough here. Okay. The officer wishes to come back on the 106 question.
Yeah, sorry about that. We were just trying to find the answer to your question. I think Debbie responded on the affordable housing issue. In terms of open space, yeah, it appears that that is an omission within the report. And our landscape section within their comments are requesting a contribution for off-site open space. So if members are happy, we will add that into the requested section 106 obligations. Thank you.
Thank you for that. So if I'm getting this right, Councillor Jones, you proposed?
Yep, I'll move the recommendation on the basis
correct?
that
Yeah.
that green space contribution is, or open space contribution is included in the eventual discharge. Thank you.
Sorry, Councillor Sweeney.
What is the travel plan monitoring?
So there's one of the conditions requires them to produce and submit a travel plan.
What's that mean?
Well, it's to encourage more sustainable modes of travel to and from the site and within the site.
I don't know. Clue.
So we have, this is a standard requirement on a residential scheme that they submit that travel plan, but then the part of that Staffs County Council want to monitor how that is working for 5 years, and they require a financial sum to pay for their monitoring of that.
Well,
So-
for example, on Clayton Road, I've got a resident who thinks that the cycleways from Western Park Roundabout down to home base, which I think we probably put in 15, 20 years ago. And it was just, they must have had a bit of green paint and just painted the edge of the road and put a white line down the side of it. And this gentleman thinks it's not fit for purpose anymore after 15, 20 years. Could that sort of thing that active travel plan be looking at it? Because we put these cycle routes in and they're not fit to be used. Well, the county council put them in. But if this is a county council issue, could this not be taken up with the county council using this sort of money for that?
Well, I'm just bringing up the travel plan that they've submitted, but I think the sort of thing that you're talking about would probably lie outside of something that is reasonable for their residential travel plan. So the sorts of things that are referred to within that document. Sorry, just bear with me. So the objectives of the travel plan are to achieve a higher awareness of sustainable travel options for residents and visitors, increase the health of all users of the site by increasing the proportion of active travel, i.e. walking and cycling, encourage less reliance on the car. So just seeing.
So improving a cycleway, tick that box, wouldn't it, really?
So it's things like a travel information pack, which is provided for residents on first occupation of the dwelling. These are standard sort of things that are provided within these travel plans. And so that would give travel information on public rights of way, bus stops, information on car sharing initiatives, etc. Then there would be details of walking and cycling routes. Yeah, public bus timetables will be provided to residents. I think we'd have to look into it and discuss it with the county council, really, as to what is reasonable. But my initial thoughts are that what you're asking for is perhaps outside of what is reasonable.
Oh, that's okay. Thank you.
But I can look into it and come back to you. If you
I'd
like
love you
after the
to, Rachel. Yes,
meeting.
I think it's a fair point I make, to be honest with you. On
Okay.
active travel plan, there's a cycle path you can't use because it's full of holes. It seems an unreasonable point to me. But yeah, thank you, Rachel.
We will look into it and come back to you.
Sweeney, are you still prepared to second the proposal with the amendments been listed?
I'm more than happy to second it, Chairman. It's an excellent proposal. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I ask all those in favour of the application and the recommendations in terms of the 106 monies and the trees and the research into the travel plans? I think that's unanimously passed. Thank you very much, councillors. We got there. Okay. The next item on the agenda is item number 8, to be found on pages 57 to 64 of your information pack. Application for other development, Brookside, School Lane, Onley. Sorry. Oh, I missed that one out. Sorry about that. I'll take that one next. Item 7, application for minor development, Newcastle. Museum and Art Gallery, Newcastle-under-Lyme, Borough Council. Presentation. Councillor Jones.
Sorry to steal thunder of the officers, but I'm really satisfied from the reports and willing to move the recommendation.
I'm happy to second it, Mr. Chairman. It seems to be eminently sensible and entirely harmless.
Thank you for that, councillors. All those in favour, please show hands. That item is unanimously passed. Brings us on to item 8. Brookside, School Lane, Onley.
So this application is on the agenda only because the applicant is a member of Borough Council staff. So it's a very minor householder application. I can show you the details if you wish. It's for a single story extension to the side. So yeah, this is the property on School Lane in Onley. There is an existing garage to the side, and the proposal is to replace that with a more attractive single story extension than what's there at the moment. So no concerns raised in the report. Yeah, and that's it.
I'm happy to move that, Mr. Chairman. I welcome the transparency as to why it's on this agenda, but I don't think my colleagues are going to have any objections to it. So I'd like to move the recommendation.
Okay, thank you for that, councillor. Moved by councillor Fear, seconded by councillor Jones. A show of hands, please, in favour. And that, again, is unanimous. Thank you very much, councillors. To number 9 of the agenda, and that's 5 Boggs Cottage, Keele. Over to officers.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, members have asked for a regular update on the appeal. You'll now see that we've had the appeal decision received just before Christmas. So the appeal in terms of enforcement notice was quashed, and in terms of the decision, the development has been allowed. But if you've had the opportunity to read through the decision notice, which is actually quite extensive for an appeal of this size, there are a number of conditions that the applicant has to comply with. So notwithstanding that the council have not been successful in terms of the enforcement notice in this case, what we will be doing is monitoring the conditions, and if there is a breach, then we will proceed with the appropriate enforcement action. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Members will have read this report. Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, this is an unfortunate result, I think. It does impact an area of my ward and impacts on a number of residents in the proximity of the location. I'm not going to spend any time talking about the pros and cons of the outcome that we've had. I just want to move forward with this. And I note that the inspector in quashing the enforcement notice has placed a number of quite specific conditions. And in all fairness, local residents have very much focused on those conditions. I've had very little backlash as to the result of or the outcome of that. It's been a very focus on those conditions. And there are certain parts of those conditions that I and residents have significant concern with. The first of which is the condition to demolish the garage, which has a very short time frame in which it needs to be completed. It's our understanding that there is live power to that garage, and we would want to see that the authority is ensuring that on demolition of that garage that it is signed off safe, because that garage is adjacent to a resident's property, right up against the boundary of a resident's property. And if there's live electrics going there, there would be a hope that we as the borough would ensure that that has been demolished and left safe for the neighbouring residents. There's also a query about, and I do respect the officer presenting and saying that if these conditions are not met, then action would be taken. I think we would very much be concerned about what route that action would take, because for residents, this has been an ongoing saga for a significant amount of time. And for us as a committee, it's been an ongoing saga. And I look to those longer tooth on the committee who have dealt with this much longer than I have. And some level of reassurance to myself and to residents that enforcement, should the requirements not be adhered to, would be swift rather than lengthy. And then a final point, we have, and through your predecessor, Councillor Fear in the chair, kept this as an item on the agenda. And I would have hoped that should the outcome that we were looking at, then this would have come off the agenda. But with the ongoing potential for enforcement along the line, should these conditions not be met, I would request that this is kept on the agenda to ensure that we keep the profile of this and the enforcement of any conditions that may or may not be met over the time frame that we have. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Councillor Fear.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I share Councillor Jones's disappointment at the outcome of this process, but I also share his sensible attitude that there's no point in crying over spilt milk. What we've got to do is go forwards. Here, as has been said, there are some very specific conditions. I think enforcement is something which is very public facing part of what the council does. And this is almost, you might say, a sort of flagship case in that regard. So I look forward to, I hope anyway, compliance with the conditions. Let's be honest, nobody wants to go in for enforcement. But if those conditions are not complied with, I look to our officers to enforce fair's fair, after all, that side of this decision. In that regard, I think the councillor is right that quite a lot of residents are interested in this, and it is probably no bad thing that we keep this on the agenda so that we are apprised of whether those conditions have been met, and if indeed they have not been met, what we are doing about it.
So move on that the report is to be noted, and the feeling is that the council still want to keep this on the agenda. Could I see a show of hands, please, in support of that? Thank you. That's unanimous. Item 10, urgent business. I know of not of any urgent business to come my way. Anybody else have any urgent business for this agenda tonight? I look around, I don't see any. So in that respect, I call the meeting to a close. Thank you very much for your indulgence tonight and your assistance. And thank you very much to our reporter. We'll be getting an early night. Thank you.